Hi guys, I'm Amanda. Today I'm going to show you how to use spirals and spiraling as a tool against anxiety instead of an anxiety trigger. I am an anxiety coach, clinically trained, and I work with adults dealing with persistent, pervasive anxiety. I help them go from feeling like they are constantly at war with said anxiety to growing to a point where they actually befriend anxiety and feel in control of that relationship. I've noticed this trend in sessions lately where spirals get a really bad rep. And in this video, we're going to go over three things. One, how spirals, understandably so, get that reputation. Two, how buying into the idea of spirals are bad and avoiding spirals actually makes cohabiting with anxiety a lot harder. And three, how to reimagine spirals so that we can think about them differently and use them as a tool in your toolbox, which is a 2-for-1 because you're actually removing that tool from anxiety's toolbox to put it in your own toolbox. Let's get started. Number one, how spirals get a bad rap. Think about where you hear the term spiraling on the daily. We're usually talking about spiraling out of control or spiraling downward, right? We don't usually say, I spiraled into bliss. It's usually into something tragic. Spirals are often associated with a funnel picture, like a tornado. It has that downward, chaotic connotation that goes along with it. And again, we don't usually say, I went down into something great. For that, we would usually use the term up. I've noticed my clients use the term spiraling to indicate being stuck. I was spiraling about this thing because of XYZ. They mean they felt helpless, like they couldn't get out of their thoughts. They were stuck in a thought spiral. These aren't very bright and sunny associations that we make with spirals. So it is our survival brain's biological duty to notice those associations and then guide us to safety. Our survival brain notices, hey, that's usually connected to unhappy stuff. So let's not mess with spirals. Let's not get into spirals. Let's stay away from spirals. AKA, let's avoid spirals because they seem to be dangerous and associated with unhappy things. That is how spirals get a bad rap. And it's a perfect lead in to how avoiding spirals makes cohabiting with our anxiety a lot harder. Once we subscribe ourselves to spirals are bad, we've now given anxiety another tool, another trigger, that much more substance to work with, okay? Because now all our survival brain has to do is spin this quiet little, what if we're spiraling thought. And now, just because it had the word spiraling in it, not because our survival brain shot it at us, not because it came out of the blue, but because it has the word spiraling in it, we latch on. And we go, oh no, I don't want to be spiraling. This is bad. What do I need to do to combat that? Do you see how we kickstart that cycle? We fuel, we throw gas on a fire, right? We fuel a trigger that didn't really have to be there to begin with. It wasn't there until we labeled spirals as bad. Once we label spirals as bad, we give anxiety power. Remember a minute ago when I mentioned being stuck? Okay, I'm seeing over and over my clients confusing being stuck in a spiral with actually being stuck in a cycle. What is so scary about being stuck is that we're afraid to be doing the same unpleasant things, unpleasant feelings over and over and over and over again. Okay, a loop, a cycle, right? A cycle that we don't know how to get out of, and we feel stuck and we feel trapped, and it's terrible. Okay. A spiral is actually not bad. Okay. What we need to do when we feel stuck in a cycle is find a way to crack it. Spiral out a little bit. Let me explain. First of all, it would be great and fabulous, even if we could crack a cycle and then beeline in the opposite direction over to this oasis over here, right? And start a new pattern over there. But that's not how it goes. once we break, put a little crack in a cycle, which takes a lot of energy, by the way, and probably some experimentation, which equals time, which equals energy. So a lot, right? We put in a lot to make that little change. And oftentimes we end up falling into the momentum and going all the way around, back around the loop. It's a very similar loop, which can be disheartening and not motivating, but it is actually different because we cracked it over here. And now we're just, let's say, outside of that old cycle, that old line, right? And if we keep cracking and keep making breaks in the cycle, we keep spiraling away. We can spiral around, spiral out. That's actually how we get unstuck. So back to anxiety got us to subscribe to spirals are bad, right? Avoid them. Well, by avoiding spirals, we're staying stuck. And anxiety loves that we don't even challenge a cycle since we're afraid of spiraling. Cycles hold you stuck. Spirals are how we change, grow, move, explore. So now how to reimagine spirals. How to think about them differently so that they're less scary. Movement and direction. Okay. Cracks in that cycle. Our survival brain is always surviving. Okay. Survival brain, aka anxious brain. So when we go to crack a cycle, our survival brain pipes up and it's like, yeah, but what if that change that we're about to make in the cycle is actually even worse than the cycle we're already in, that cycle that we already know, that cycle that we love to hate, you know? And a lot of times we get caught up in that thought, we feed into that thought, and we stay in the cycle to avoid the unknown, okay? The terrible that I know is better than the possible terrible that I don't know, or so our survival brain leads us to believe. But that's the thing about spirals, and one of the reasons why they're so great is that spirals can go all different ways. Up, down, left, right. They're always adapting. When we are moving, spiraling, we can go any direction we want. When we're in a cycle, that's when we're stuck. That's when we're in a set path, going over and over and over again. But our survival brain leads us to believe that if we break out of that cycle, if we start to spiral, then we can never go back. It puts a huge amount of pressure on the decision, on the action of breaking a cycle, of putting a crack in a cycle. But it's just not true, okay? Because that spiral can take us all the way around and back again. We can come back to that cycle if that's what we want to do. Do it quick enough and there'll still be a rut there for us to fall into, okay? Breaking a cycle is not an irreversible move. Don't let anxiety tell you otherwise. Another way to reimagine spiraling, okay? Anxiety is bolting away and I say, just stop. Anxiety says, no. So how do I curb anxiety? How do I turn anxiety? I apply a tool to it. You know, here's a distraction. Here's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here's my transition song, right? Whatever it is. Anxiety's still running in the background. And I don't feel fabulous. But I got that first big circle started. Gained control on it. Of it. All right. Third and final picture. The dreaded tornado funnel. When anxiety is feeding the narrative, okay, the bottom of that funnel is, quote, the end. And we don't know what the end is. So that makes it extra scary. And now I'm really scared of being in the funnel. I'm scared of getting to the bottom of the funnel. I'm scared. I'm just scared all around. Okay, but why are we scared? Because anxiety told us to be scared. Fair. Funnels, from a different point of view, the funnel indicates that there's a bottom. There is a point where anxiety, whether we call it runs out of ideas or runs out of juice, there is a point where anxiety has to take a breath. And if we're ready to jump into that breath space and turn the tables, we can absolutely use that. The bottom is not the enemy, okay? The bottom of the funnel is not the end of life. It's not the start of an apocalypse. It's a teeny tiny break, at least a teeny tiny break, where you could really turn the tables and get out of that, whether it's an anxious spiral or a thought spiral or whatever kind of episode it is. On one hand, it is that easy. On the other hand, I don't mean to make it sound quite so easy. Okay. Anxiety can be very colorful, very creative, very persistent. Okay, I know. It might take a thoroughly thought out contingency plan for alien invasion before you reach the bottom of the funnel. And I know that's not fun. Hey, and I'm not judging. I know that's true. I've seen it myself, and I've seen it in many, many clients. Okay. The point is redefining the bottom, right? It's not some scary unknown. It's a spot where you can put your feet on the ground. Rock bottom analogy, right? We do all these things to avoid rock bottom. Once you get there, you can push off. Okay? Similar with the scary funnel. At some point, having our feet on the ground has merit. So, this has been my take on spirals getting a bad rep and how removing the scary stigma from spirals actually gives you more control around anxiety. And it takes at least one tool away from anxiety. You may have noticed that I personify anxiety like an entity that is separate from yourself. Okay. I'm not trying to say you're possessed, right? But anxiety really is how our instinctive, latent survival brain talks to us, and how we talk back really matters. That part of our brain is very different and separate from our logical thinking brain, okay, which is what we've learned. It's how we reason and how what we choose to do with all the information that we get flooded with in a day, an hour, even. So if we have to live with this anxious part of our brain, why not befriend it? Now, I understand that befriending your anxiety may not sound super appealing right now. However, if this lesson was helpful and you're interested in learning more about befriending your anxiety, then I have a free email course with a link under the video that you can sign up for. I would love to get more opportunities to show you how befriending your anxiety gives you back the control in that relationship. Clients tell me all the time they feel more like themselves again. They feel like they felt before whatever that acute anxious trigger was, before whatever invisible anxious cliff they fell off of. They feel more like themselves. And I want that for all of us. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos from me. And for now, check out the links below.